Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of the 2009 Doctor Who animated special, Dreamland, the second of only two David Tennant animated specials, but considering the animation for this one, I'm actually kind of not surprised. Okay, so the plot of Dreamland, I think it's supposed to be set between the waters of Mars and the end of time, as the 10th Doctor says at the start of the end of time. He didn't go straight to the U-Planet, he had a bit of fun beforehand, including the events of the Day of the Doctor, probably. Possibly. So Dreamland has the Doctor going to Dry Springs, Nevada, 1958, for some chili. He's trying to get some food. However, the day he and two other people, the waitress, waitress slash manager, Cassie, voiced by Georgia Moffat, who played Jenny in The Doctor's Daughter, and will go on to marry David Tennant. So it's Georgia Tennant now, and also Fifth Doctor, Peter Davison's daughter, and also Jimmy Howell, Jimmy Starkin, voiced by Tim Howler. So he meets them there. However, he's not the only person to turn up in Dry Springs. The Alliance of Shades also turns up, and one of them, Mr. Dread, attempts to steal this thing called the Ionic Fusion Bar, which is some sort of piece of junk, Cassie thinks, that her bar has, her diner has. So eventually they have to make a run for it and eventually find themselves face to face with a Viperox battle drone, as following up Jimmy's reports of something eating the cattle at a nearby ranch. That was not a cougar, it's something bigger. And it turns out to be a Viperox battle drone, and the military at Area 51, aka Dreamland, know about it. By the way, I have to mention, is that how is Dreamland a secret base if a main road goes right through the middle of the base in part 6? That's probably a flaw on the animators. Never mind. Anyway, so they're taken to Dreamland after the Viperox is destroyed, and they're kept as prisoners because they want to erase their memories of having seen the bugs. So the Doctor and company have to escape, and eventually find that they are holding another alien, a different type of alien, one that looks more like the alien, the typical stereotypical aliens we see associated with the Roswell crash. As this story takes place 11 years after the Roswell crash in New Mexico, 1947, and this alien that they have here is supposedly the one from that crash. However, the Ionic Fusion Bar has come from one that came from 5 years prior to the events of this story, so there's been a second spaceship crash. Anyway, they find one of the spaceships, I'm not sure which one, but they try to escape in it. And it turns out the Colonel Stark, is in league with the head of the Viperox, known as Lord Aslock. Although it's not an easy alliance. Eventually, the Doctor and his friends make it to a village called a small mining town called Solitude, and finds the Viperox base right beneath the surface with an alien queen, with their own queen, hatching an army so that they can invade, perhaps. After that, they then, after another running with the Alliance of Shades, they then team up with Jimmy's grandfather, Night Eagle, I believe, and they find the alien from the ship crash from 5 years earlier, only to be captured by the military. Somehow they found them, and eventually Lord Aslock and General Stark are revealed to be in cahoots so that Lord Aslock can avoid having his people destroyed by the male grey alien. The one they find in the caves is male. The one at the base was female. They're a married couple. And the male had Ryvish Mantlax had created a weapon, and it turns out to be the Ionic Fusion Bar is actually the weapon in disguise that would destroy all of the Viperox, and the General has teamed up with them so that they could use it against Russia, as this is 1957, we're in the height of the Cold War. The Doctor doesn't agree with any of these ideas. He thinks the Viperox should have a chance to become good, as he believes they will be. He knows they will be, so wiping them out is a bad thing. But he also disagrees with wiping out he also disagrees about wiping out all of Russia. But despite an attempt to have the Ionic Fusion Bar out of both Aslock and Stark's hands. Aslok kills the Ryvish Mantalax. However, Stark does join the Doctor's side after he tells him about the Viprox horde, leading to them having to team up. But Aslok escapes. Sarupa Valak, the female grey alien, then realizes that she has to get something from her crashed ship in order to save him. However, there's something else inside the warehouse where they are, so they have to be quick about it and have to escape. The Doctor also sends Jimmy and Cassie to pick up the TARDIS whilst the military fight off the Viprox. And eventually, the Doctor uses once Ryvish Mantalax is resurrected, the Doctor asks him to activate the weapon. However, he, instead of using it to destroy the Viprox, he uses it as an amplifier to attack their nervous waves. As throughout the story, we've been reminded that they have very good hearing, and pretty much sends off the Viprox away from Earth after that. So that's basically Dreamland, and it's a pretty simple story. It's pretty good, interesting. However, there's a big letdown for this story, and not necessarily the story itself, but it's the way it's presented. The animation. Oh boy, this is probably my second at least favourite animated Doctor Who story that wasn't one of the Flash animated webcasts, which were Death Comes to Time, Real Time, and Shada 2003. This is my least favourite of those ones where the animations actually move. My least favourite being episodes 4 and 5 of the Reign of Terror. That animated reconstruction. So this one comes next. The CG 3D CG doesn't really work for when they're trying to do the human characters. With the aliens, it's not so bad with the Viprox and with Ryvish Mantalax and Sarupa Valak. That's okay. In the backgrounds and the ships and the planes and tanks and stuff, that's all fine in the backgrounds. But when it comes to the human characters, it's super stiff. It's super awkward and doesn't quite work. It might have been better if this was a 2D animated 2D animated one, or at least one that looked more 2D, or like the Infinite Quest. But it just looks a bit awkward here for the human characters. At least with the Power of the Daleks, where with the original version, we'll see what the special edition is like later in a few months' time. But at least with the human characters there, which was the weakest element of the animation for that story originally, at least they still moved pretty well. And the characters designs were pretty well. These guys look a bit stiff and clunky and look like plastic. They just look like plastic. They didn't quite work. Even action figures in action figure stop motion adventures look better than these 3D models do. It's a bit odd. The aliens aren't too bad. They're pretty cool. But the human characters and the Doctor, not so much. They are very stiff and it doesn't look quite right. And the really doesn't work alongside the vocals. For Infinite Quest's vocals lined up with its animation really well, but this one, I think the vocals are a more standout part than the animation. That means that the animation for the action is pretty decent as well. It's pretty interesting, and like I said, the non-human characters are done well. The story itself is all right. Characters are pretty interesting as well. Georgia Moffat, future Mrs. David Tennant, does a great job as Cassie, and is a more enjoyable character than Jenny, to be honest, a little bit. Also like Jimmy quite a lot. He gets kidnapped quite a bit. The male character gets kidnapped a lot this story than the female one. Although that being said, because of all that, he doesn't get as much of a he doesn't get his main credit in the titles. And whilst he is considered a companion, not as much as Cassie, still he's still a fun character and really enjoyable. And Tim Howler does a great job. Also, I like Night Eagle. He's a fun supporting character as well. General Stark's a good character, and the actor who plays him is going to be in Series 6, his first 2 episodes, as Richard Nixon. Speaking of returning actors, David Warner voices Lord Aslok. He's brilliant. He will go on to be the ship captain, a Russian scientist in Cold War on the submarine, and both he and Georgia Tennant have had Big Finish experience. With Warner even being the Doctor twice, at least beforehand, and probably a few times after, definitely a few times after this with the Bernie Summerfield adventures. But he's been the one of the Unbound Doctors before. One of those stories featuring David Tennant as a supporting character before he played the Doctor on television. And Georgia Moffat has appeared in at least one Big Finish audio before she got the role of Jenny, and I don't know if she played any other roles in Big Finish ever, just apart from reprising the role of Jenny, besides the one character she played in an audio called Red Dawn from 2000, which I've heard it's alright. It's the first appearance of the Ice Warriors in Big Finish, and also returning as Jenny in 2018. I'm not sure if she's voiced any other characters in the meantime or afterwards. But yeah, they're all good here, and I think that's about it. And also, Nicholas Rowe, who played young Sherlock Holmes in Young Sherlock Holmes, is via Pitch Mantax. He does a good job, as does Lisa Bowerman as Surupa Velak. Oh, Lisa Bowerman, also from Big Finish, as Bernie Summerfield, and also Carr from Survival, the last classic Doctor Who story. She's great here as well, as is Raoul. They're both great. They're really enjoyable as their characters, and I like some of Surupa Velak's comments with the Doctor when they're stuck in the box hiding from this creature going around in the warehouse. That's pretty funny. She's a fun character. Overall, this story is pretty good, but the animation kind of lets itself down. It does start to get a bit slow later on. It is probably because it's designed to be 6 parts, one 30-minute part, and then 5 6-minute parts. I think that was the case, like Infinite Quest was designed as 13 2 to 3 minute parts, although that one, as an omnibus edition, is edited slightly better and fits a bit more better with connection. This one feels a little less well edited as an omnibus edition. There's a bit from what would be parts 1 into part 2, where at the start of what was part 2, the individual episode, a soldier reported to Stark about the Doctor and the others escaping, and Stark says, "Don't let them get away again." Here we hear the radio sound. Stark picks it up. He says, "Don't let them get away again," and then it fizzles again before he returns talking to Lord Aslock. They cut the soldier reporting to him line, and it does feel like some of these connections from part 1 to part 2 are a little bit clunky. The part 5 to part 6 one's not too bad. I think part 1 to part 2 would have been fine had they included that other line. Part 2 to part 3 isn't too bad, but 3 to 4 is slightly clunky, and 5 to 6 is definitely a little bit clunky as well. Still, it's not too bad. It at least manages to work as an omnibus edition and full episode. Again, 45 minutes, just like a regular Doctor Who episode, even though it came out at the time where the regular episodes were the specials, which were about an hour. But it's still a fun, enjoyable adventure. The story starts to slow down around the part 4 area, but the last episode, what would be the last episode, is pretty enjoyable. But despite that, the animation kind of sucks. Although the TARDIS is better done here than in the Infinite Quest, or at least the exterior. The interior is pretty cool as well, though. But the exterior is better, and I am glad that the TARDIS is the normal TARDIS from live-action TARDIS in the title sequence. However, they cut down the title sequence for some reason. I don't know why. They had the extra few seconds. They could have had the full title scene, but they cut it down, which is something a negative over Infinite Quest, where they played the full title sequence there, just replaced the TARDIS with an animated one instead of the usual one. Whilst here they have the usual one, but they cut down the sequence for some reason. I don't know, but it's a bit odd. But anyway, overall, Dreamland, it's good, but it's got the animation for its humanoid characters kind of sucks a little bit. Quite a bit, actually. So I will be giving Dreamland a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I did wonder about giving this a 6 or not, but I thought it's still pretty decent. It's still pretty good in places. So it does take its time to get there, and it does feel more like a multi-part story than Infinite Quest did, whilst that one just felt like it was going through with some events that being where each episode would be, but it still kept itself moving, and it used its the 45-minute length really well for this one. This time it feels more like it really was written to be the multi-part version as opposed to a full version, where events would happen and what would be the different episodes. But it still sort of works in a way, and I think it's alright. It's just a shame the animation is pretty poor when it comes to the human characters. The aliens and the backgrounds and the settings and everything else, it's not too bad. It's pretty fine, but the human characters, they look pretty stiff. Still, it's not too bad. It's pretty interesting in places and pretty cool. I'm wondering if Phil Ford had a thing about Area 51 Dreamland, because he wrote this story, but he also had. Did he write Prisoner of the Jadoon? He might have, which came out a few weeks earlier. The Sarah Jane Adventures story, Prisoner of the Jadoon, the first story of series 3, and they built a spaceship similar to the one that we get in this story with the Roswell crash one in that story. And then a year later, in the second story of the Sarah Jane Adventures Series 4, The Vault of Secrets, we've got the 3 of the 4 Alliance of Shades members who are guarding a Vault of Secrets underneath London. So I'm wondering if Phil Ford maybe wrote that story, because that does serve as a sequel to Prisoner of the Jadoon as far as the character of Androvax is concerned. But I'm wondering if he did write both Prisoner of the Jadoon and The Vault of Secrets, if he had a thing about using the Roswell, about Area 51, and whether, because he was writing this story, maybe they had the spaceship in Prisoner of the Jadoon be the one from this story, and then in The Vault of Secrets, he brought in 3 of the 4 Alliance of Shades. Not sure why the 4th one wasn't there, but I guess they couldn't cast a 4th person. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, maybe I'm wondering if Phil Ford had a thing about it about Area 51 at the time, or if elements from this one were seeped into his Sarah Jane scripts around that time. Possibly. That depends if he wrote Prisoner of the Jadoon and Vault of Secrets. I'm going to have to check that later. And if I will definitely talk about those stories more in depth when we get to their reviews. When I say more in depth, we'll talk about them a bit more when we get to their reviews. Anyway, so that's it from me. Thank you for watching my review of Dreamland. Next time, the 10th Doctor's final story, The End of Time. We'll be reviewing both parts 1 and 2 together in a single review, as per any usual 2 or multi-part story. And yeah, this one's going to be a big one. Stay tuned for the final 10th Doctor story, The End of Time, coming tomorrow. Hopefully, if all goes well. I'll see you guys then. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. And they find the grey alien from the 5 year ago. Two things. So that even though Power of the Daleks animated episodes, the human characters were still the most the least well done. They were the weakest, and does an even more enjoyable voice portrayal than. But besides the last TV appearance of Doctor Who, he's. Overall, they cut a line from that moment that would have cut linked up. They cut the other, but 4, 5, and 5, 6 in places. It does slow down a little bit towards the end, but it also that's where most of the good stuff for Androvax to escape. And then a year later, in the second episode of the Series 4 Sarah Jane Adventures story, and then a year later in the Sarah Jane Adventures Series 4 second story. But anyway, that's it for my review of Dreamland. Thank you for watching, and next time we will stay tuned, folks, for the final 10th Doctor adventure. Well, the final